recording for security purposes only. Members of the public could be recording the meeting. We'll do the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Anybody have any amendments to the agenda? There being none, open comments. Comprehensive plan, public hearing is July 30th. And the manager requested that we all attend that if we can. Since it's our doing. Pro or con. Okay? Public comments. 3 minutes per person. Anybody want to speak? You want to speak?
I do.
Okay, we'll listen.
Okay.
3 minutes.
Laura Dangle, 425 Klein Road. I would like to ask the Board of Planning Commission how many that are here this evening are satisfied with the current planned residential section of the zoning ordinance. There was a discussion at last month's Board of Supervisor meeting regarding updating and revising this. Are you satisfied with the current PRD, Mr. Majors?
Yep.
Mr.
If
Horn?
you want, you do not have to. She's asking.
Mr. Horn, are you satisfied with it?
Absolutely, 100%.
Mr. Majors? I'm sorry, Mr. Eisenbrow?
Yes, 100%.
And Mr. Brinkle? I would like to direct your attention to the Zillion Opal recent groundbreaking on the Glade Run Adventure site. There is an outcry in the community of Zillion Opal about the size of this development. That development, which is 1/4 of what it was originally intended to be, because of an amendment to the Planned Residential Development Ordinance in Zillion Opal Borough, a review process which took place after the applicant had filed. And it went like this: whereas the Borough of Zillion Opal does promote the public health, safety, and welfare through the adoption, administration, and enforcement of a zoning ordinance. Whereas from time to time, the Borough of Zillion Opal finds it necessary to amend its zoning ordinance in order to achieve and advance the preceding goals and objectives of the community. That being said, as you've announced, there's an update to the comprehensive plan, which is required to be done every 10 years or thereabout. So I would like to make this public declarant as a call to action for anyone in the community to attend this meeting, to stand up and to speak up regarding the next 10 years of New Sewickley Township. While a comprehensive plan is not a law, it is an advisement for the future of New Sewickley Township. New Sewickley Township residents have been very outspoken regarding their concerns with development. We do not feel that the Planned Residential Development Ordinance section of the zoning ordinance that is currently in place protects our township, and certainly not the public health, safety, and welfare. This board has done an injustice to the community of New Sewickley Township, and the residents are asking for you to consider revising this ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, but I do not see any public outcry of the ordinance as it presently stands. I did hear some comments negative about it, but I wouldn't consider that an outcry. But thanks for your comments. You want to make comments also?
Yes. If I may.
Okay, go right ahead.
My name's Alex Meter, 1770 Pine Run Road. I kind of just want to echo the same thing. I was looking at those survey results, and the top comment was not cranberry threats and developers. And just kind of the way that it seems like it's going is this development is going to be relatively unchecked and almost a snowball effect based on the recent zoning. That first housing plan, I don't know if it was 400
Why do
or
you say it's
160.
unchecked?
Unchecked?
Yeah, you said it's unchecked.
Well, first off, I'm concerned about even affordable housing. As a person in the township, if I wanted to buy those houses, I'm already priced out of the market. You know, I've had to wait years and pay taxes for years to improve my land. And yes, the value of my land has come up. But if I wanted to buy some of that development, $350,000, $400,000. I'm sorry, Mr. Major, you're a math guy. Like, what would be a 30-year mortgage rate at 7% interest? How is the average American in New Sewickley Township going to afford something like that?
Well,
And
the
what I
country
see
goes
is-
through negative economic times all the time, and it's just, you know,
But
a couple of years ago, the interest rates were 2%.
Well, regardless of that, the voice of the township said not cranberry and development, and it seems like the board is moving forward in despite of the public's voice. As constituents, you carry the voice of the public. It seems like our voice is being drowned out while your team goes ahead and makes those decisions, which is going to benefit a few, not all. And I wanted to see, how is this going to benefit the average person that already lives in New Sewickley Township, that has been dealing with potholes in the roads, who has to pay the stormwater fee, who's struggled to feed their family, who's fought for this land. My family's been here for 130 years, and you want to give it to a corporation, a bank, and sell it back to me? That is rather unfair.
We're
And
not
I would
giving
think it is a
anything
serious
away.
injustice to the community members here that want to keep New Sewickley Township rural.
We can act on the comp plan as already been ruled out. There is a public hearing coming up the end of the month. And you can voice your concern of what the comments are. But what we're gonna do, as the planning commission, we're gonna review parts of the comp plan that the survey showed what the residents wanted, or not wanted, but voiced their opinion on. There's not been any outcry at all on that development up there. None whatsoever. There has been some opposition, and I agree with that. I don't have a problem with that. We all can't be 100% behind anything. But if somebody buys property and comes here and says they want to develop it, they have to follow the rules of the zoning laws, the way they're written.
Then protect
And that's
us.
not saying that we can't review them, but if they're following the rules as they are, it's our job to oversee that, stay within the lines of what it says.
The rules as they are benefit the developers, not the existing residents. The planned
My opinion and your
but the intention of a planned residential development ordinance is to benefit the developer. That is the intention of a PRD. A PRD is not a PRD is not for me. A PRD is not for a single family house. That is true. That is 100% true. A PRD is for a
50%
development.
of the plan is single-family house.
But a PRD is for a developer. I personally could not go in and file for a PRD. I would file for a SAUDO. I would file for a subdivision and land development, which is separate than a PRD. A PRD is solely written for the benefit of the developer.
No, it's for the benefit of the township to meet the laws of the nation, actually.
Then
are
make
required.
it to protect the existing residents. That's what
It's
we're
not
asking. It
hurting
is not
the-
protecting us.
I don't feel it is hurting the existing residents.
It doesn't have
If
setback
somebody-
requirements.
if somebody-
They can build within a certain footprint of our,
That's the whole idea. They
No, that's
give-
not the-
They give up other things for that.
and that's why you have your underlying zoning. That's why you have your underlying zoning. That is why you have your zoning.
No, PRD is part of the zone. There's no underlying.
And there are no setback
whatsoever.
requirements listed in the PRD. These are the concerns that were raised during the
Right.
during the
Same
hearing.
People that had comments negative to the development. That's it. So that's not half of the residents of the township. Any other comments? I'm sorry, I didn't want to get into it.
That's fine, I understand.
But I want to clarify what you're saying. Any other comments by anybody?
May I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you wanted to be the voice of the people, why not put it on the ballot and call for a vote?
Our job is to write ordinances for the township and meet state and federal law. And that's what was presented in our home zoning booklet. It's not one development or another development. It's for a resident, someone who buys property, to decide how they want to develop it. And they have rules that they have to follow.
Let me ask you this. Has there been any consideration to a foreign national buying up land in New Sewickley Township to develop it, send it back
That's
to us?
federal, the federal government.
But do we have any ordinances for
No,
that?
we don't have ordinances.
Why? Why not?
Because it's federal, that's not the local or state.
I thought you just said you had to carry out. You were talking about the federal and state level. You were zoning because of that. So that's
The law, the ordinance as we have written them are written to meet federal and state court cases that are on the books. So they are tweaked to meet different types of court cases that have already been heard over probably 100 years, I would assume.
If I may.
Yeah, go right.
The state describes what a township is allowed to and not allowed to regulate, and that's set at the state level. So when the township establishes zoning ordinances, there's certain items that are allowed to be put into the zoning ordinances, and then there's other items that are regulated at the state level, and then there are other items that are regulated at the federal level. The township does not have the authority to regulate who, resident or non-resident, can purchase or not purchase land. That is not a township allowance. It's called municipal planning code, and it's very clear. It describes what a township is, what a borough is, at each level of number of residents that you have. That describes what your incorporated status is, and then the state regulates what you can and cannot regulate based on the size of your community. So its state very clearly spells out what the township can and cannot regulate. And then there are subsections where the township can decide to follow the state law, or if it writes its own laws, then it has to forego certain privileges that the state gives to people that follow the state laws. So it gets kind of complicated, and I wish the attorney was here to describe it to you. But essentially, the planning commission for this size township can write ordinances that generally regulate development, but they cannot write ordinances that take away the right of ownership or the right to develop your land as you choose. So the township cannot come in and tell you beyond a perimeter boundary of things what you can do on your property. It's pretty clear. There are questions about whether a PRD is written for, I've heard this before. The PRD does the same thing that a single-family zoning does. What it is that the person that's coming in to request a PRD writes down where they want to see amendments or changes to the zoning. And the Planning Commission has the opportunity to review the requests and verify that they do no harm, essentially, to the adjacent properties. So if nope, you've had your 3 minutes. You've actually had 6 minutes. The adjacent property owners and everybody in the community has the right to comment on that, but nobody has come forward and shown that they've been harmed. There were some adjacent property owners who asked for some concessions from the developer in this particular PRD, and they have the right to do that, and he has the right to accept a request. And in some instances he accepted, in some instances he denied. But it's a give and take with a PRD, but it is the township's lawful position to work with whoever wants to develop. And it could be a business owner. You can have a planned business development. I think some of these industrial sites are PRDs as well. So it's not just that one developer came in and wanted to do one thing. And the landowner had the right to sell to the developer. The developer, once he buys the land, has the right to develop it as he sees fit. It's not, and the township all the township can do is follow the ordinances that have been laid out under their regulatory jurisdiction. And some of it does fall to the state, such as the planning modules for the wastewater treatment. Does that
Okay.
make sense
Yeah,
to
yeah,
you?
thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure.
Could I speak for a minute?
Sure, go right
Oh,
ahead.
thank you.
Lucky we only have 4 guys here tonight.
Oh, this one doesn't count.
4 people, I'm sorry. I should say.
I'm Norm Meter, and I represent the Beaver Valley Pointer and Setter Club over on Bonzo Road.
Yeah, I talked to you a couple of times.
Yes. Anyway, there's traffic, it will increase over the years, it's a fact. What the Pointer and Setter Club probably going to have to do is build a big fence on Bonzo Road to separate our animals from the road. It just, I hate to say soccer moms, but the people drive nuts on that road. But our goal is to maintain that particular property in perpetuity. We're doing things to keep it as a green space essentially forever if we can pull it off. But the population grows and traffic starts to flow, it gets harder and harder to protect the asset. And for what it's worth. Okay.
Well, the last census showed that the population of New Sewickley went down. So it's gonna take a while to get it back up probably.
Well, more than likely, but we're talking perpetuity, so I'm looking at a long time. We're talking a
years.
10-year project here, right, for this.
I think also, for the record, the size of the development did not require a traffic impact study. However, the planning commission did request and require the developer to submit one. So there is a traffic impact study that was completed for this development at the request of the planning commission. Not required, but they requested it because of concerns like yours about the traffic on the road. And then they went ahead and also required investment in the road itself as part of the development PRD. So the amendments, some of the amendments to the general that came out of the PRD process were the traffic impact study and improvements to the road. So there were advantages that were given, but I think the traffic impact study came back and showed that the level of service on the road would not be degraded by the number of housing units because it is primarily.
Right, but just, I'll give you an example, Green Valley Park, Lower Green Valley,
Yeah.
just with all the soccer and the other events that go on there, the Bonzo Road traffic, which was not too much of an issue over the years, has become one. In fact, I think we had some of the policemen had a little spot on the property where they were pulling out. I don't know if they were caught anyone or not speeding, but, it becomes an issue. But again, I think our only solution for it at the time is for a fence. Of course, we've got a heck of a lot of frontage, but
There are state grants that can help you with that, right?
yeah.
I'm trying to think a little bit, I know I've talked to you a couple of years
Right.
ago, but Bonzo Road is the main road that would connect your property?
Bronzo and then
White's Hill.
White's Hill.
White's Hill.
Yeah. Between the two of them, it's
Just trying to get back to see. I never could figure out exactly what your in and out, your egress and the egress was. But, okay.
yeah. Most of the people come in from Bronzo. Some come in off of 989 and then.
Yeah, I would hope that, again, we're talking years, not the near
Right.
future, but as traffic increases, it is the township's responsibility to improve roads to meet whatever the traffic situation is. We do have a lot of side roads. I wouldn't consider Bonzo a side road, but there's a lot of small roads that certainly need it updated as more and more traffic develops.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Bonzo gets a little tricky, what is it, Mitchell, that goes down over the hill to the park. Because, when we bring in horse trailers and things like that, there's not a lot of room on that part of the road for
yeah, I hear you.
2 vehicles safely. But that's really not an indirect people around. There's ways in the township to do that, and we're still under any weight limit that I'm aware of at the moment. But it's just the actual volume of the traffic has become
Understood.
and it's still not too bad, but I can see in the future,
Yeah, Mike, you had a question?
Yeah,
You wanted to
for
speak?
Joanne, more or less. I've been reading that the state legislature feels as a general rule that township zoning is way too restrictive and are working on laws to eliminate our ability to even restrict it in some way. Have you been following that at all, or?
So the general problem nationwide is that housing is unaffordable.
Yes.
The primary, we're actually going to talk about it today, but primarily the assessment is that zoning restrictions in the past, the single family home was the ideal. The house on a quarter acre, a half acre lot. At the current price points and economic conditions, the single family home with two parents and two children, the dog, and 2 or 3 cars is unachievable for most Americans. And the general feeling in the planning and government is that we need to find new, the family unit has changed. So, for example, in New Sewickley, the average household is 2 persons, and that 2 persons is often 1 parent and 1 child. That's out of your comp plan and out of the census data. So looking at a single parent household with a single income, needing to find new housing types for people that don't necessarily need the 1950s single family home. And so generally speaking, most zoning ordinances in Pennsylvania are written to accommodate and promote that large single-family home on a quarter acre to half acre lot or more. Yours prefers a 1 acre lot. That's unaffordable. So trying to find ways to create affordable housing, one of the thought processes is to look at zoning that is restrictive of lot size minimums and reduce it so that you can have a smaller house for a smaller family on a smaller lot, especially for families where maintaining a large yard may also be onerous and costly. So that's the thought process, is finding new ways to make housing affordable. A secondary thought is there are now a lot of families where it's multi-generational and they may want to live either in the same house or maybe on the same property. So you may have the grandmother or grandfather living in an accessory dwelling unit on the property, not in the same household but adjacent. The zoning ordinance currently only allows 1 residential structure on a property, but if you want to have a granny flat over the garage, or your adult child needs to live with you and you don't want them in the house and you'd like them to have a house on the back, 10 acres or 5 acres or whatever, right now that's not allowed. And so providing opportunities for multi-generational households to live adjacent to each other but maybe not in the same house is another consideration that people are trying to sort out. So there's a multitude of housing types that are currently not allowed in most communities in Pennsylvania because its focus has always been on promoting the single family, nuclear family unit type. And this change is an attempt, and the studies are an attempt to find ways to create affordability for the new family types and the new economic conditions.
Affordable housing, as described by the federal government, is modern mobile home parks. That's what they call affordable housing. So, ain't gonna happen. Any other questions? Good. Good luck.
Chris Aspenflute, 1752 Pine Run Road. Looking at the chart here,
Meets. So she can give us the overview of the plan. And tonight we picked housing as the educational program, what she's gonna do. So however you wanna handle that, both of them, the A and B. We didn't get the top, so
Right.
I'm not sure how you wanted to go about it.
So I had thought about, from the comprehensive plan, I've misunderstood possibly your direction, and I recall you because I was on vacation, so it's my fault.
You're allowed to do it, you're allowed to do vacations here.
But I was thinking that you wanted to start looking at the implementation opportunities, so I had sent you the strategic, objectives, the policies, and the strategic actions worksheets that were at the back of the comprehensive plan, so that's what really printed out for you. So we could talk about those. I could also just run through the sections of the comprehensive plan. I feel like you all know them pretty well. Or we could talk about what you feel are the important subjects to touch on. And I do have housing. So if you want to start with housing, because I think it actually leads into the worksheet. I created the presentation with a thought towards having you start to think about the worksheets and how you can manage those. So I think it would be easier to start with housing.
Yeah, I would like to see your housing theories. What do you think?
There's you have to push a remote somewhere.
Oh, no, sorry.
There was a
Is there an
remote.
extra room
The remote down there?
in front of you?
No, no. Don't see it. No, it's behind it.
That's it.
It's
Is it on?
It's coming.
it's coming.
It's coming.
It's warming up.
If I
Warm
turn
it
off
up, I
that
can see it.
light, I'd be able to see.
There you go.
I was not expecting that. Okay. That's just the front page, so we all know where we are and who you are, so we're good there, right? And the idea behind the presentation as I prepared it is that this is a discussion. I'm going to run through some facts to start, and then the items that I took from comments that were made during the community workshop and challenges that I've seen on a state level, national level, from just various education sessions and et cetera, that I either get emails from my associations, the American Planning Association, the Green Building Council, American Society of Landscape Architects. There's one more piece that's, so I get a lot of emails that talk about, and housing is the hot topic at all levels. So just a discussion overview. What did we learn in the comprehensive plan? What are the current challenges that were identified specifically in New Sewickley? And I intermixed that with trend discussions on zoning. And then I have the implementation here, so talking about what you all want to start considerations for what actions you might want to take. So just to reiterate some of the items that we learned. So by location, New Sewickley is 74% rural population and 26% what is called urban population. By location, housing is about 71% rural and about 29% urban housing by type. So ownership, which is important, is 17% rental and 83% owner occupied. You can start to see, so depending where you take the data from, this data is from Western Pennsylvania statistics, which are slightly different than the census statistics. Just so when you see those anomalies, it's because we try and tap into different resources, but they're close and they're within marginal errors. What type of housing is in New Sewickley? So 66% is single-family detached. 15% is attached, so some sort of townhome or duplex. 13% is 2 units or more, 3 to 4 units, 5 to 9 units, and mobile. 13% is mobile. The 2 units is 4%. So this red is this mobile or other, just because it's a little fuzzy. So that is your housing type makeup.
Can you go back there again?
Yep.
I'm a little bit surprised that mobile is such a low number. We have numerous mobile home parks.
But how many units do they
2
have?
of them are very large.
But, so, if you would guess, how many do you think are in a? So what so you have approximately 3,300 housing units. So 10% would be 300. So.
How many housing units do you have? 3,000.
3,253. So do you think you have more than 300? So
I'm pretty sure we do. But
What, 300 mobile homes?
There's 12 quarters, right?
Yeah, but that's probably about accurate because Knobview and Forest Brook would be your 2 biggest, which I would say maybe
I thought
75 or
Knobview
100 homes.
100.
was it Knobview 200?
I don't think it's
I don't
that.
think it's that high.
I don't think it's that high.
So at 13%, if they're each 150 or something, right?
There's a lot of mobile home
Did
parks.
you?
Some of them are only 10.
Yeah, they're
Some of them have.
pretty small.
So.
Little Acres only has 2 left.
2.
That had somebody living in it. There's a lot of abandoned. And they've been getting demolition permits for those. We get them out.
All right, it just looked like a low number to me. That's all.
Good.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about these statistics is, I think there is, and I know that we found this when we did the comprehensive plan. There's perceptions about what something is, but then when you start to actually do the math and count up the houses, you realize that you might see it every day, so you think there's more of it, and yeah, I think it's just important to, these are, I don't make these up, I just pull them off of databases, so it's not something that.
On the ownership, is it the 83, is that 83% owner
Yes.
occupied? Is
Yes.
that what that is? I should have brought my glasses. All right, well, if you don't mind me asking a question, I just want to.
No, this is supposed to be a discussion, so,
I mean, I've looked at all these before, now you're getting detailed.
right. Well, that's why we want to do one each month, right? So you can look at the
That's what I
details.
want, I mean,
And then, because I think you look at the details and then you have a discussion about what actions might want to be taken, the policies changed. But it's better to not look at the overall, it's better to look at each section of data individually before you take action. So this is what I was saying to Mike earlier, is this is the household size, and you can see that the greatest number of households are a 2-person household. So that's either a single person and a child, and you'll see that on the next page, or a 2-person household, no children. But yeah, the next most greatest number of households is single-person households. So when you're talking about what type of homes are needed, this is what impacts those decisions, or should impact those decisions. So 42% is an opposite sex spouse, 1% same sex spouse, But the 36%, the large gold area, is a child. So in referencing the previous graph where it says it's a two-person household, you can see that most likely it's a parent and a child in those demographics.
One parent, one child, 36%.
Well, 36%, so if 36% of your households have a child in them, and half of your households are only two-person households. I mean, there's more math that can be done there to give you exact numbers, but generally speaking, 30.
What's the 42%?
42% is an opposite sex spouse. So between a spouse, same-sex spouse, and a married partner, you're at 49%. So 50% of your community is somebody living with a partner of some sort.
I wouldn't look at that as a good number.
Well, I think, again, statistically, and what the nation is seeing is that you've got children living with their grandparent, or I know we have friends who the father lives in one state and works, and the mother lives here with the kids and stays at home, right? So we just don't have the typical family unit that was prevalent in the 50s and 60s anymore. A lot more kids are adults living at home, other relatives. So in your community, so this is the information that the census captures. So in your community, you can see there's a son or daughter-in-law, other relatives, foster children. You don't have those numbers. But you do have other non-relatives. So you have people who are, I think we all did it in college, but it changes. But you still have 3% of your population are two non-related people living together that are not in some sort of relationship.
It's a relationship, but not a.
It's friends. Yeah. So then, again, here's another statistic, and this is over time looking at number of children in a household. And what you see is, and you see it in other ways too, you see it in the school population when we looked at education in the comprehensive plan, but you can see that the number of school-age children, so 18 and under in the township is going down. It's decreasing, and it's continuing to decrease.
That's just for Sewickley Township, right?
Yes.
The school district's made up of other communities, but
Right.
this is
just
Sewickley.
This is households with children and households without children. So the green is without children. And then homes built by date. So I think here's another bubble that's very interesting, is that you had a housing boom in the 80s, less of one in the late 90s, early aughts, and almost insignificant since then. One here, one there, but no significant amount, about 47 in and around 2020. So, not
Well,
only-
that would be, I'm thinking here, that would be Danbury, Freedom Crossing.
So the other thing that is important about this, not just the number and the years, but this also tells you the age of your housing stock. So most of your housing stock is, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, which then comes into this issue of it may be more affordable for somebody to buy it, but the amount of renovations and remodeling to bring it up to code to keep it intact, to maintain it, is also problematic. If somebody's buying a 60-year-old house, there's a lot of maintenance that has to happen. So those are behind the scene issues that come with this sort of gaps in new housing.
That graph started at 1920.
Yep.
Is that what I'm seeing?
The first dot is actually 1930. The 1920 is the first number.
Yeah,
The first
the
dot
19
is
yeah, you're right.
1930. Because it's coming off the centennial census, so it's every 10 years.
So up to 1960.
This is-
We're gonna go 6, 11, 13, 1,400 homes.
And you can see in the numbers that kind of adds up to the number of homes now you have. It's about 3,300. So, and then, value. Interesting that with a mortgage, it's at a higher value, no mortgage. And the values are climbing as expected. I think there's a big reveal there, just FYI.
No, you're looking at mortgage homes, you're up to 250,000, or 210,000.
Yeah. So I think that's, so in this, generally speaking, that's a pretty affordable house in today's market.
Yeah, that'd be very, very.
So, I found this morning and I thought that it was very interesting. AARP is always a wealth of information, but they published a study called The 7 Megatrends, Housing Challenges for an Aging Community. And I didn't pull out your demographic, but your community is aging.
We're aged.
You're aging. The average age is increasing. It's now somewhere in the 60s. So your average age is
38%.
yeah. So I think that this is important to understand these trends for an aging community. So these were their words, not mine. The study is available on AARP at Housing. It's called The Future of Housing. And I just pulled it out because I had started this PowerPoint and was writing a bunch of things and then discovered that what we were talking about matched their 7 megatrends. So I thought that was interesting. So the first 4 are the 4 that I'm going to touch base on next. The last 3 I think are important to talk about, but they aren't the challenges that came up when we did the outreach for the comprehensive plan. So I'll touch on them a little bit less.
What would be an example of advances in technology as a mega trend?
Hold your horses, we'll get there.
We're there now, I'm asking. But if you've got more slides,
I
I
got
can
lots
wait.
more slides.
It just seemed to me, I'm trying to figure out.
Think about like Ring doorbells and Siri and smart technology. You can
That
now,
doesn't sell out though.
no, but if you wanted to upgrade, so if you wanted to upgrade your 60-year-old house and you wanted to wire it for cable, how does that happen? That's a lot of drilling and grinding and threading or false screws or false walls in order to mount a TV to the wall. What do you have to do to mount your 70-inch TV screen?
I'm learning.
And not, the 70's probably small, I don't know. I have a very
Well,
small
it seems to
TV.
me,
But that's just to mount a TV to a wall and get the cable to it without having an entire box, right? That's technology changes since that house was built. The house was built, it didn't even have cable. You had rabbit ears.
yeah, well, today, you don't have to even run the wire. It's all Wi-Fi.
That's only if you want to not if you want really good gaming.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So, from out of the comprehensive plan workshops, one of the subjects that we talked about was housing, and comments that came in, and the comments are all documented in the comprehensive plan itself, and this has also come up in our zoning discussions here at the Planning Commission, the request for accessory structure changes and accessory dwelling units. So the idea of being able to have the granny flat. We also had questions about being able to have a rental unit on your property or a short-term rental, but the rental units. So somebody may buy a duplex and want to be able to rent out the second unit so that they can make some income so that they can pay for their mortgage, right? And right now, your zoning does not allow that. So allowing that secondary unit on a site is something that is of issue. So we also have talked about tiny homes, and the state and the International Building Code have construction standards for tiny homes. Right now your code doesn't address it at all, so it defaults to the state, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but we've come up against some questions about how that is working, so I think it's worth addressing. Right now it's a minimum square foot size, but somebody could come in with a PRD and ask for something different, so that would be something of consideration. And then for all of these, access to utilities. Utilities are just going to come up again and again and again. And then there are questions like, should somebody that wants to do tiny homes or a tiny home or cluster development be combined to areas that have proximity to public utilities? Should they be allowed if percolation requirements can be met? These are questions, not statements. And then how will these be addressed in the PRD standards? And so this is where the strategic actions might be under consideration. And so thinking about those challenges, these are some of the zoning trends that are happening in the state level and at the national level. Overlay districts are being created specifically to allow things like cluster homes, more specifically so that a developer doesn't have to go through the PRD process, but can create conservation areas and avoid steep slopes, streams, floods, and still achieve some return on their investment in the property. And keeping in mind again that the developer buys a piece of property based on what they think their development value is at, and that is a resident who owns a piece of property wants to be able to sell it for its maximum value. So, so maybe so that they can retire. So it's not just something in the interest of the developer, it's also in the interest of the seller who wants to be able to realize the value of their land so that they can do their next move in life also. So I had a discussion with, I think it was Steve, about minimum lot sizes. Right now you have essentially 2 lot sizes. Essentially almost an acre, 40,000 square feet, and essentially a quarter acre. And those are your only lot sizes. So that puts a lot of smaller opportunities that pushes the price point up for somebody that wants to invest in the community. So there's zoning trends to reduce the minimum lot size and allow higher density in specific districts and areas. Also give density bonuses when a developer places development closer to the utility corridors or closer to the schools. I know the school population is decreasing, and we heard from people that they're having trouble with busing. So because the busing is expensive and the bus drivers don't always show up. So providing areas where families can live in proximity to the schools in a way that would allow them to, both the school and the family, to achieve some level of better attendance, easier attendance. Again, update accessory structural allowances to allow for the second residential structure, so the accessory dwelling units. Question again. Revise lot coverage standards for a second residential structure. So I know there's been this question about how large of a accessory structure is allowed in the township. We've been talking about it, I know, within the context of the shipping containers, but also just in the context of allowing for a garage, and what if that garage has a granny flat in it. So now you have two issues. One is that you don't allow a large enough garage, and you don't allow a secondary living unit, so you can't have a granny flat, be it for your adult child, but colloquial term is granny flat.
And it almost hinges on septic anyway, right?
And then it all hinges on septic, which is why I started out with density bonuses for building a new. So Pennsylvania specifically has this problem that in rural counties, the availability of public utilities is minimal. And so any of these densities really need to be thought of in consideration with utility access. So I'm not just saying everybody gets a accessory dwelling unit, but it still has to pass the state requirements for a secondary unit. So it's not just let's change the code tomorrow. It's let's think about how this process works. Also, again, with the thought towards economic development and the challenges that we're having somewhat with these agritourism businesses, really you need a short-term rental ordinance. Maybe it incorporates or amends the current B&B resident, but B&Bs are less popular now than short-term rentals. So I think that's a trend that is a vacation rental recreational trend that needs to be acknowledged and then addressed. And also from the standpoint of creating economic opportunities for your residents, maybe they have a big farm and people want to come and milk the cows or drive the tractor. They should have the opportunity to do that and make some additional income, but also making sure that it doesn't just become a party house and then disturb all of the neighbors. So there's two sides to that short-term rental B&B question, because a short-term rental, a B&B requires the owner to be on the property. The short-term rentals do not. So if they do not have an owner on the property, then in the structure with the vacationer, it's no longer a B&B according to your ordinance. So there's some language that needs to be sorted out there. And then again, I just sound like a broken record, but realigning the zoning districts to align with infrastructure. So the gentleman today talked about transportation and roads. I wanted to mention to you, in the comprehensive plan, pages 55 through 60 specifically speak to the type of roads, the number of trips that are generated on those roads, who owns the roads, and crash incidents. And I think that would be worth taking a revisit as you look at Bonzo Road and Whitehall Road, in consideration of what you're thinking about. I think there's some valuable information there. And it has some links to the state websites where you can see where they got their data from. Location utilities, proximity to schools, and level of service on the roads, making sure that, again, thinking about which roads do we want to accept that the level of traffic is going to increase, and then also consider, well, we want to direct traffic away from this collection of roads, either because they're township roads, you want the state to maintain the roads that have higher traffic numbers, or they're rural areas where you might want to preserve a new corridor, things like that. So those considerations should be made with the zoning districts.
Can I ask you on that last one, level of service from road, that's what you just explained?
So, level of service is how, the civil engineering, traffic engineers, I forget their acronym, measure road, traffic and service. So, a level of service of A means the traffic flows, the speed that's allowed, or permitted, without disruption. And as the level of service decreases, it goes from A, B, C, D, E, F. You may have a road where you're okay with a D level of service because you don't really want the traffic to go with the speed that's permitted. So you may have a road that has a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit on it, and you'd really prefer that people are only traveling, and the level of service is D, which means everybody's only traveling 25 miles per hour. So level of service is how much the road is accommodating the level of traffic that's on it. There's also a number of trips. The number of trips is just a count, it's a straight up count. So your traffic impact study, when they do, they'll count the trips, and then they'll look at what the road is designed to accommodate, and then they'll give it a rating on the level of service that it has. And then the second part of the impact study is they'll project what the new development will have an impact on that level of service. So in my mind, you need to look at the roads and kind of decide. I think that there needs to be a slightly closer look at the roads that can accommodate more traffic and roads that you want to specifically discourage more traffic on in the future, and look at your zoning districts and make sure that that's aligned.
When we were doing the zoning, if you might remember, not remember, we qualified roads as a specific name, like an arterial. And I think that would be like Big Dog Road, that take all traffic.
Right.
And then the roads off of Big Dog were called something else.
Right. So
I
there's,
can't remember what that was. Then there's a third level that for the private drives.
right, there's regional connectors, there's local connectors, there's other, which is,
Yeah, I think that's,
Right.
you're using the terms I remember now.
right, so that's in your comprehensive plan. It actually shows how the state classifies all of your roads. And the second part of that, and the reason that you collect that data and put it in your comprehensive plan, is so you can see these are regional connectors. So when I think that this is where people that live in New Sewickley Township are going to Cranberry to work, or going to Ohio to work, whatever, they're getting on the regional connector. You want to cluster your higher density housing and your utilities all in those corridors. When you get to a local road or an other road, those would be the areas where you want to be the lowest density, and so that it's gonna maintain its rural character most significantly.
I think we qualified Route 68, Big Dog, 989, Freedom. I think Freedom Road was special, but what's up for it?
Well, we knew it was going to be a major connector, regional connector.
Yeah. And
Oh,
I mean-
the other one were arterial and lower even.
Right. So affordability. So the next item that came up a lot in the workshops and the survey was affordability. So I think the most important thing to think about is the supply and demand. It's sometimes called the mismatch, but the availability of housing of the type that's needed versus the housing of the stock that you have. So you have a larger collection of single-family homes. You may need single-family homes of a certain size and lot size, and your trend is towards needing housing stock of a different variety and of a different value range. And then much of the housing stock is aging, we saw that. Much of rural housing does not have access to public utilities. And we have the conversations that we had were, and again, it's in the comprehensive plan exactly, but the number of people having challenges with their septic and their water is slowly increasing. Many people see that in the future they would like to have. So we had about 75% of people have private septic or well water, but it was closer to 50% would like to have some access to public service. So people see that the future is, there may be problems in the future. We had a lot of people come in and say that their well is less, it sometimes goes dry, or they have to be careful and monitor their use in a way that they didn't have to in the past. So questions like that. And so again, so other things, supply and demand. The houses that are available and that people can afford aren't close to the schools or not on a school bus route. Baby boomers are retiring, moving out, and they have a big family house and they want to sell it for the maximum value so they can retire, but that's not the opportunity that new residents are looking for something more affordable. There's challenges for people on fixed incomes.
Mike has a question back there.
Yeah, I'm remembering right, Joanne, but in the comp plan, did it say that we have like 200 houses in New Sewickley that are just sitting unoccupied?
Something like that, yeah, we can look, but.
Would that seem like an abnormally large amount for this kind of an area or not?
I think again, it's this mismatch, and that's nationwide, is there's a mismatch between, I don't know exactly the statistics, like I have not looked exactly, and you can't look at like Cranberry because they're obviously completely different, right? But generally speaking, the nation as a whole has a mismatch of housing, and what happens is that somebody in one of the workshops that we did talked about how their parents have passed away, they live somewhere else, now they have their lot and they have the house, they still own it, but what are they going to do with it? So it's owned, but it's unoccupied. And as you have a population that's gradually aging, you have more and more of these situations. And especially in rural communities where it's like a family farm and there's 5 kids, but the kids have all moved away and they don't farm anymore. And, but they don't want to sell the farm, so the house is sitting vacant.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd asked me before the comp plan, I'd have said, oh, there's 25 in the township. When I saw that 200, I was like amazed. I would not have believed it. But I've been looking now that I've been driving, and I'm surprised how many houses I do see that the grass has grown up, and it's a decent looking house sitting there just empty.
And maybe the kids use it once a year to have a family reunion, and they cut the grass and they spruce up what they can, and then they don't come back again until next summer, right? And then selling the house is hard because as it sits vacant longer, the remodeling costs go up. So it becomes more and more problematic to update it to the point that you have to tear it down.
I'm sorry. Is there any? I mean, if it sits empty for, I don't know, 2 years, is there anything that has to be done to get it going again? Do you have to check the sewage or anything like that, or just people just move back into it and start?
We don't have any data on why those houses are vacant, do we? Is it because the well ran dry? They can't get water, or is there any data? No, right?
You'd have to go and ask each one individually because each one is like each one could be a completely different
Or
scenario.
it's in a state and they're fighting over that.
Right.
We don't know any of that.
I mean, you had somebody right when I began as your planner. There was a family that came in with 5 kids, and they divided up the lots equally, but that meant that the house some of them couldn't have a house because the old house was still there. And so then they left and were trying to figure out how they could divvy up the land so that they could live on it. But regulation tests have changed, so. Yeah, I mean, it might be like that, they might try to redo their septic system and not perk anymore also, right? Or the well is dry, I mean.
I was just wondering if it's a water issue, a perk issue, or just
It's
family
just-
fighting issue.
Yeah, I bet each one is slightly different, but, so, we talked about this before, families are downsizing, also residents are living longer, the changes to the family unit makeup, are different, and there's just not as many new options for those, demographics to, and your zoning, again, your zoning doesn't really allow new housing types like the tiny homes or the granny flats. So that's a challenge that residents here experience. And then I bring this up just because your zoning also does not allow many alternative business options for farmers. So if Ed wanted to retire, he can't like transfer his farmland to another business type.
Mainly because it would be considered commercial.
All kinds of reasons. I mean, like, you can't transfer to solar because you don't allow solar. So you couldn't do a solar farm, you couldn't do a wind farm. If you don't have oil or wood on your land, you can't take advantage of any other resources. If you turn it into an agribusiness, it would be agritourism, it would be commercial. And so you might either fall into the short-term rental that you don't have, or if you have people renting out your farm is really your only option right now. So I think with a community of farmers, you have a very limited options for them to wind down their business or find supplemental incomes, which is, I think, a challenge for the farming community. And then, so trends, housing stock, there's a mismatch that we talked about. I think the action that's really needed is to take an inventory and analyze and understand what is the need and what is the opportunity, what do you have, what do you need, what do people want. The inventory needs to look at housing costs, locations, types of houses, what updates would be needed. I think there are things to understand. The state has multiple grant programs for rehabilitating old houses, but you need to be able to kind of tell people that when they come in. Also, consideration of most of your workforce works somewhere else. What would it take for them to live here? Like, what would you need to be able to live and work in the same township? So what I know Amanda talks about, like, she would like to live here, but she can't find a house that fits her budget and lifestyle. How do we help? How do we get Amanda into a house? That's really the question that we're asking. Is how do we get those people that want to live here into a house? And I think the first step is to have a real housing inventory, not just the snapshots provided by census data.
How would you do that?
You can actually take your role, you have your list of all of your residents. It's in mail to them, you have a list of all the residents. You literally do a survey, set it up as a database, and then you would go through and you can pull information off the auditor's website, and, but essentially putting it into a spreadsheet, preferably GIS, where you can then start to put some parameters on it and spit out some analysis. It's something, I think Debbie Grass, when she was here, talked a little bit about it as well, but that's something that I think could help this conversation. So then a couple other trends right now are There are grants for subsidizing remodels. There are also tax abatements, so there are communities where if somebody comes in and buys a dilapidated house, these communities are setting up tax abatements where their taxes are abated for like a 10-year period, which gives them the cash flow to remodel the house. So somebody that can maybe afford the purchase price, but can't afford the remodels, and we give them that tax abatement, then they can use that tax money essentially to do the remodel. So it's a trend. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do it, I'm telling you this is a trend for remodels.
We talking at a couple different type meetings about trying to do the inventory of vacant houses. Did that come up?
We touched on it, but I don't know how you do it. You have to drive around the block. They're all.
Well, I thought that maybe the police riding around, they could start marking down addresses that look abandoned. I don't know, just to get something. I mean, there's abandoned houses that are dilapidated, nobody would buy it, fix it up. But then you got the next step is, do you have water and septic? That's a harder thing to find out. I don't know if
We have to ask the property owner, because she moves out of her house, they don't want to tell us, hey, we're moving because there's septic or water spill.
They don't even move out, they just abandon it.
That's what I mean, we don't get that data.
With 200 houses in
There's
this
something
small
to get a data
community.
on
There's
abandoned
a lot.
houses through tax now. It's that, taxes aren't being paid, yeah, we get that information that it's paid.
I think
And
we
you
ought
could cross-reference, you have the all permits, so you know there is a database of, it's private, but there is a database of,
to abandon.
no, of all the wells.
So,
Water wells?
Yeah,
I don't know that unoccupied means abandoned either.
I don't know what it means.
Unfortunately, have a house, I have a neighbor who has moved out years ago, and they maintained it, or they were saving it, and when they retired, they're coming back. I don't want to refer it that way, I'd rather see abandoned, actually, but, I wouldn't call it abandoned, but it's not ideal. It's just not.
I'm just thinking out loud, 200 homes is a lot of homes.
I think your point is it's a range.
But if the taxes are being paid, that's another thing. It becomes a bigger problem when there's no taxes cut. That's a bigger issue.
I know, like, Chris is saying there's certain houses by my house that are, they're owned, and I know they own them, but they don't live there, they live other places, and they stop by every once in a while and say hello. Somebody pays somebody to cut the grass. I mean, you don't really realize that they're empty, but I know they're empty.
But are they coming up as abandoned or vacant?
They're
Taxes are
unoccupied.
paid.
Unoccupied.
So I think it's important, all of these terms have very specific meanings. You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to mention back to you, while we're talking about affordability. Affordability, the definition of affordability is that you spend 30% or less of your income on your housing. So that's the definition of affordability. So, but you can go to the bank and get a mortgage for 50% of your income. That makes, you can't pay it, but they'll give it to you.
That wouldn't be healthy for our township either.
No. But affordability has a very specific definition, so it's not just that it's trailer homes or modular homes or a certain, or duplexes or something. Affordability is defined as, that the owner is spending 30, or the resident is spending less than 30% of their income on that house. So if you're on a fixed income, it changes. If you're on a dual income, it changes what affordability means, but that's the definition. So we need to be careful not to assign affordability to a housing type, but understand, that's why then it's important to understand median incomes and
With median property values.
with median property
And that's
values.
where you're at.
Yeah. So it's hard to pull out just one statistic and talk about it, but trying to contain this so that we're not here till tomorrow.
Well, I'm thinking of it more of the housing stock, whether it's abandoned, vacated, or whatever.
I'm not,
The bigger problem I see is they don't have access to water and sewer, public water and sewer.
Not always the case, Al.
Yeah.
There's some houses where there are public utilities that are vacant.
Would that be, would they lean towards the Pine Run area? It would. Because there's sewer and water available.
Find the one in Free Crossings that's paid for, they don't live there.
Well, those are the ones we don't have to worry about. We know that's a good living.
It's still vacant.
As long as they pay the taxes, though, the pay the taxes would see
They're all, the only way you're gonna, the house comes up, as I would say, is abandoned, is when it comes up for tax sale. They do, they're, might get 10 a year, but,
that's not bad.
and they may not even be abandoned, people will be still living in them, but they just can't afford the taxes, have to pay the taxes, and it's going up the tax bill, because sometimes you encounter the ones where they have to get occupants evicted out of the house, because somebody else purchased it.
Need some assistance.
speaking of which, fee in lieu of payments to fund a fund to help people who may have fallen into arrears for whatever reason. So this is another trend that communities are looking at where they have residents. It often comes about is senior residents on fixed incomes, and as the cost of living goes up, they find themselves in financial jeopardy. And some communities are looking at whether it's development fees or other ways to raise funds to create a fund to assist with those people. And it's often on a
I would think that's more in urban areas than rural areas. Well, there are
Yes.
urban areas that are
Oh.
trying to fund. They're using tax dollars for funds to encourage people to move there because
Absolutely.
they have the houses, they have the work, but they don't have the people.
But you've got your little urban areas like Rochester, and parts of New Sewickley, adjacent to the schools. There are areas here where maybe somebody can or cannot afford to live. I hear a lot of comments in our workshops and meetings about people that went to stay in New Sewickley all their life. They don't want to have to move out, but for whatever reason they can't. So these are ways, that last one is a way to address challenges by citizens and residents who may have challenges financially to keep them in the rural setting. I'm not telling you you should do any of these things. You asked me for trends, so I'm telling you trends.
Yeah. What's going on out there?
So then again, demographics, aging in the community, rethinking what a single family home means. Again, talking about what is a family. We now have parents, grandparents who are taking care of the grandchildren versus the adult or the parent. When people are aging, if they want to downsize, where do they downsize to? There's a national trend for PRDs to be senior communities. I think the anticipation is that Meadowcrest is primarily empty nesters, right?
I really don't know.
I know, I don't expect
No, I
anybody
look
to answer
at
any questions about
Danbury and what's going on in Danbury and Freedom Crossing. I don't know their demographics, but I can assume I know. But I don't know what they are.
Yeah. So again, looking at where are people downsizing to, so opportunities for granny flats, accessory dwelling units, cottage homes is a term for if you have additional homes on a larger property or collection of cluster homes on a property. It's just another way to say a cluster of small homes. And again, how do farmers downsize? Can they rent the farm? What are their secondary sources of income? Or redevelop the farm? I mean, I know that makes everybody angry, but if you need to sell, you need to sell. So I think that the thought process that it needs to always stay a farm doesn't take into consideration ownership rights. And then other things to consideration for staying in a community. So aging in your community, what services are available? So in-home health care, lifestyle services, transit, get to the hairdresser, get to the grocery store. What options are there available for people who need to stop driving or should stop driving? Senior mobility services and microtransit. Again, looking at just regionally, the bus doesn't come only reaches Rochester, right? So if you live out further and you can't drive, how do you get those services into your house? And there is that access bus and things like that, but they have limited availability and they cost money too. So transportation's a challenge in an aging community and a rural community, both.
May I ask a question? Just
Sure,
about
go
the solar, is that like a solar farm, are they permitted in the township currently? Is there consideration to?
Well, they're allowed in industrial, light
They're
industrial.
allowed in the industrial.
I got you, okay, but not, you're saying not on a farm or something like that?
Not commercial, out in other places.
They're only allowed in the industrial
Residential
district.
solar is allowed.
Resident, okay. Is that being a consideration to allow farmers to do that?
No, just be my own personal opinion, I don't take it too.
No, yeah, please.
The feeling is solar farms are not very pretty. They're not aesthetically rewarding. So we made the attempt to have a place for it, which is the light industrial. But residential solar is allowed, as long as it's for the resident that's installed.
Okay.
So we made availability to have it in New Sewickley, but in a Pacific zoning district.
Gotcha. Thank you.
To expand on that, there is, we actually discussed it at the last meeting. The state is currently working on legislation about solar farms, so we are also, even though there are considerations for it, we're waiting to hear what they come up with, because there's no sense in going through the work of changing any ordinance when it could easily be in conflict with the state.
Understood.
State law in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So infrastructure challenges, utilities, I know we talked about this ad nauseum, but just some items that are challenges now. Percolation tests are becoming more stringent. Well drilling for water is becoming deeper and less water is available. We're having dry spells. Subdivision of lots. So I mentioned the family that tried to subdivide their lot for the children and couldn't because of the percolation requirements. And then the location of the water and sewer is limited. And the distribution doesn't really match the zoning districts. Where there is water and sewer isn't necessarily where there's allowances for the the quarter acre lots. We won't call that high density, but the quarter acre lots. And then school proximity, I shouldn't have said limited, but there's proximity to the schools, and it gives families pause for where they're gonna buy a house, whether they can get their kid to school or not. Because the school location is not centralized. Busing is limited, and the school's struggling with costs for busing, there aren't alternative transportation options. And this is a quote from a federal study that came out of Congress that cities with more restrictive residential zoning are less effective at providing high-quality public education at affordable prices. So I know that you don't make decisions for the school, but I think it's important because people buy houses based on the quality of the public schools or availability.
Very true.
These are challenges, the trends, and these are somewhat recommendations also, is that the Act 537 plan, I know that the municipal authority is doing a study right now about options and opportunities, and it would be beneficial probably to update the Act 537 plan in conjunction with that at some point. There are state grants that would pay for some of those costs. And then in developing the comprehensive plan, the maps that are in the plan are very small and difficult to read, but there are steep slope maps, water resource maps, and the soils maps. And those, specifically the soils map, really tells you, if you dig down into it at a larger scale, you could see where percolation actually may not happen. You can start to develop a plan around where you think that housing still could happen with septic, and where it's just not going to happen with septic because the soils will not be conducive to creating septic fields. The same with water resources, because you know where your tributaries are and the aquifer underneath as well. So those are items that could be studied in slightly more detail to look at how and where housing distribution would make sense in conjunction with where the water authority is creating distribution. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
It's a tough thing.
it is a tough thing. I mean, they're all, these are not, if they were fast and easy, everybody would have done them already, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. And then, creating overlay districts to promote family housing options. After you do an inventory, figure out what kind of housing you need, promote that housing in overlay districts. To my knowledge, you don't have a safe routes to school plan. And again, I know it's a school district, but understanding, so safe routes to schools has a focus on children walking and taking local transit or carpooling. Here, I was thinking about in one of the communities I worked for, we actually created little hubs where it could be a destination for parents dropping off their kids at a hub, so that they didn't have to take their kids all the way to school. But the Safe Routes to School does an analysis and assessment of how kids get to school, and then makes recommendations. And then it does things like, I know you've heard me suggest adding sidewalks in certain locations, and there is funding then from the Safe Routes to School plan to pay for things like sidewalks and additional infrastructure, lighting, things like that. And then also take advantage of advances in technology, whether it's availability of Wi-Fi in locations where kids could access additional school resources, but not necessarily in the school. That gets really complicated. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about how the school district runs. These are the trends with regards to infrastructure in the schools is something that kept coming up, so I'm trying to touch on it lightly.
The trend seemed to be homeschool.
Or some version thereof, yes.
Some
which
version thereof.
Technology can help with. So, at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the AARP 7 megatrends in housing. We talked about most of them. So you asked about, these are the last three that really didn't come up in any conversations from the comprehensive plan, so I felt that I would just touch base on them because it was part of the introduction. So advances in technology. Something that's interesting is that financing and marketing are online and digital, which actually inhibits access for people who do not have reliable access to online and digital communication. Production.
How do we find out who does and doesn't?
You don't find out who does and doesn't. You create opportunities for. How you find out is, say you create a hotspot here, and then you start to see people coming in to use the hotspot, then you know that they do not have access at home. Or you ask the school, I'm pretty sure the school probably has some programs. The local library usually has a hotspot, and that's where you'll see kids.
That's interesting.
You know, it might be
Oh,
something
that-
like the Grange would have a hotspot. And you could work with them to create a hotspot, which would create a community menu for people that don't have access otherwise, or just have their cell phone.
That would be interesting.
They had to do that during COVID, that was the hotspot at the school, so people could go to the school.
And hang out
access,
outside,
yeah,
right?
sit in the parking lot.
Yeah.
after school.
How many did that?
But, so that's something where advances in technology. And then production, you talked a little bit about mobile homes, but pre-manufactured homes, they are very literally 3D printing components of homes now up to walls with the wiring inside it and things like that. So there's changes in just the technology of how a home is put together. But there's actually a group down, it's not that far away, down on 65 that 3D prints portions of homes, and they sometimes print the wiring. Like they print part of it, wire it, print the rest of it, and then it's plug and play like you do with your components in your car now, where it's those little clips. If you put a new radio in your car, you know what I'm talking about. And it just clips together just like a wiring harness. And the whole house just has a series of wiring harnesses in it. So there's 3D printing technology, and there's some IBC rules, and I'm not super familiar with them, but making sure that they're allowed because it makes the home cheaper to build because they're just plug and play. And then in-home smart technologies again. Environmental conditions, again, didn't come up necessarily in the workshop, but the existing housing stock may not be equipped for new environmental conditions. I would say two examples that I have for you is that older homes may not have full home air conditioning systems, so they may, like I grew up in a house that just had a window unit. It really wasn't a big deal because we only needed it twice a year, but now most people are struggling if they don't have a whole home air conditioning unit. To how do you rebuild a house, an existing house from the 50s or 60s that doesn't have that flue system in the whole home HVAC. Yeah, so that's my example of environmental conditions. Also, insulation requirements are different now because the temperatures are different. And you can see the temperature trend changes and the weather trend changes in the comprehensive plan. Also, utility resiliency is weak. Pretty much everybody has just one access point, and so if something fails, you tend to have a larger failure. Also, you're not seeing it in Pennsylvania, but you are seeing in other states where extreme weather is impacting and the insurance providers are moving out. I think we're pretty much insulated from that, but when the insurer moves out, then the home values decrease because nobody wants to buy a home that can't be insured. And then systemic barriers, and again, I didn't pull up the statistics, but demographically, New Sewickley is still pretty homogeneous, so this is less of an issue. But again, you don't have a stock of multi-unit homes that help or allow for people to live with an extended family or a non-traditional family. So that's a systemic barrier. And again, these are national trends, so housing and services for persons with disabilities, and then just generally speaking nationally, rental evictions and foreclosures are higher for persons of color. So those are the national trends that mentioned, just because I started out with the AARP 7 mega trends, so I wanted you to see what the other ones were. I think they're less applicable here, but just to keep in mind. This is some of the reference data that I used. The rest of it, you keep hearing me say, most of the data and statistics that I gave you came out of the comprehensive plan. So that's your reference, that's why you do it, that's where it is. And then what you heard me talk about again, and what I gave you as a handout were the printouts from the implementation section of the comprehensive plan, where it talks about what are the current policies that are from 2013. And I think this year is a good time to start looking at those policies and agree, disagree. The survey comments are included on those, so where there were disagreement with whatever the policy was, we noted it, so those are on the worksheets as well. And then thinking about what do you want to do with the policy, and if the objectives and any actions that you feel like you want to address or not address. Let's see if I can find.
Well, you caused a lot of questions there, which is what the intent is, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do. Look at what did the comp plan cause you to think? And then get some background experience from yourself to how that apply, specifically to New Sewickley Township. So
I think it's getting late, and that was long, but
you did the job.
I think looking at the housing specifically. So these were the policy, this is what I gave you
Yeah, that's what we have.
in front of you. So again, the policy objectives are, we had agreed at the beginning of this process that we were going to address policy objectives. So there they are. And then adjacent to that is the comments from the workshops. So people saw the policy objectives and agreed, disagreed, change, update, keep.
You want to do this for next month?
Sure.
I think it'd be good. I thought these sessions were extremely, they were well attended for one, and they caused a lot of questions, which is what you want to do.
Absolutely.
So we can review them, whether you have a theory from the comments or however it turned out. I think it'd be worth the discussion next month.
I think so too. And I think, so the subject areas were education, housing, infrastructure, land use, socioeconomics, and transportation. I think for you, as we talk about what to do in the coming months, the housing, the infrastructure, the land use, and then I think you kind of think about the other ones. I don't know socioeconomics and transportation and education really, as much as there are policies and objectives, a lot of that is really up to the school district.
I don't think we can affect education very much, meaning
I don't think so
the
either.
school system.
I think we should just be aware of what it was and what was said as
Right.
you consider the other items, but I
There's
think.
not much we can do as a commission to impact that.
Some point in the future, and understand they're supposed to have a strategic plan, which hasn't been published recently, so I'm not sure where they're at with it. But I think that would be a step for around surrounding education and have a conversation with the school district and their strategic plan and understand what they're thinking and how New Sewickley fits into that. And really honestly, right, you have to have the other communities that also are part of the school district, it's not just you, so. But these were the subjects, and that was what I thought would be, when you asked me what we should be talking about in the coming year. I
No.
think this is what we should be talking about.
I wonder if a conversation with a community like Economy Borough, who has much more development going on than we do, and see what they're doing, if it is impacting the schools. I don't know what development they've got, but I know there's development.
Yep.
So I wonder if a conversation with that community, whether they would have, or would sit down with us and tell us what the outcome of their types of development is, it impacting the schools.
I think a conversation with your adjacent communities is a good idea. I mean, I attended a Triborough Commission meeting right before mid-June, and it was several adjacent communities all discussing how they impact each other.
Yeah, I don't know if, I somewhat agree with you, but I can't imagine that a discussion with Cranberry Township would not be helpful.
No, you're not. No, they are what they are.
Yeah, good economy. I
Economy.
mean, they're right next to us. I don't know of any other community that would help us
Rochester.
to discuss this subject matter.
North Sewickley, that's Beaver County. Franklin Township, Marion Township. Those are all direct adjacent communities in Beaver
I
County.
think they're smaller than we are.
They're having PRDs submitted.
The what?
They've had PRDs submitted over at Hereford Manor, which is
That's not a conversation. It's not about your ordinance updates.
I'm not looking whether it's a PRD or.
no. I'm just saying they're experiencing growth in those communities as well, and that's Beaver County, and those are directly adjacent communities.
We could ask the manager to contact them to see if there's anything pertinent that's worth sitting down with our commission and their commission.
Economy Borough? Economy Borough?
I think economy for sure. I don't know about these other ones that she's bringing up. I know the community, but I don't know that.
RJ's
the impact has to be pretty small.
RJ's a supervisor in Marion Township, right? Ron? RJ, yeah.
So if we could get back to the subject.
Well, I think, I wanted to have a discussion with you. I don't really know where we're going with it. I'm just saying, how would you approach that based on doing the comp plan? And like tonight you did housing, I think, I'm gonna look closer at the comp plan based on your comments. So,
I think that's the purpose is.
yeah,
Let's talk about these three subjects that really have challenges and or comments from the workshops and a lot of input on the survey, and look at the policy objectives and strategic actions. Because I think the outcome is that you want to get to the point that you can make a report back to the Board of Supervisors that we looked at the policies, we looked at the strategic actions, and we recommend do nothing, or make this adjustment, or there was a lot of feedback in the comp plan about this subject, we think it needs a study. So that's kind of really where each of these subject matters should go, is everything's fine, we need to adjust it, it should be adjusted this way, or we need to study it and figure out how to adjust it.
well, I think all of it would end up discussions more than anything. And I'm leery of changing what I think is a good zoning ordinance that we have. But it doesn't mean we can't tweak it, not much changes. Tweak it if there's a need to do that.
Well, the state definitely recommends that you take a yearly look at your ordinance and look at the trends and make adjustments based on it.
Well, coming from the state, I would be extra cautious. I look at more from the courts that what we do doesn't cause court cases. The only way to prevent court cases is to just agree with whoever's in front of us so that they don't take us. But I want to make sure, I'm more concerned that we're on top of our game to prevent them.
I'll disagree with you. I think the way to prevent court cases is to have an ordinance that's written appropriate to the, to a growth management strategy. Because you can come down, a court can come down on either side of an issue, but they need to see that you have, a reasonable, so the developer may not be impacting anybody, and the court says they should be allowed to do that. Or the issue with cell towers. And the court comes down typically on the side of the greater good, if it's in a gray area. So what we want to do is eliminate gray areas and make sure that the zoning and the ordinances out there and the maps are moving your system towards the greater good, what's best for the greater good. But
I think we said the same thing, you make it much more clear.
Okay, fair enough. That's my job, right?
Yeah. We're gonna get a printout of your program tonight.
Lori has, I have it, PDF.
If you can distribute that, I appreciate it.
Okay.
This gentleman has a question.
Yep. On your housing plans, for your lot sizes, you're saying a quarter to half acre lot sizes. In New Sewickley, right now, you're talking about with public water and public sewage. That's not going to happen in New Sewickley for at least another 10 years. So to have that size of a lot, try to put a house on, it's going to be physically impossible because you have to have so much room in between the well, the house, and the septic system. And a quarter acre lot isn't going to give you enough room to do that on. So that right now is unfeasible in the perimeters of New Sewickley, in a township. So to do something like that right now is impossible. You can't do it.
That's why
Right now.
developers
I think-
come in, they see an
So,
opportunity
perimeter-
to do it.
I
the
think,
game.
I think maybe I didn't speak clearly. The zoning ordinance as it stands, the light purple areas allow a quarter acre lot. Whether there's public utilities available to them is a different story, but those light purple areas allow quarter acre lots.
Then,
On that
if it's
map.
allowed quarter acre lots, prove to me that you can do it
You have to have
with the parameters.
And
You
that's
have to have
why I
sewers
said
and
that
work
you
With
need
the parameters, you can't do it.
So,
If you don't have to drill a well, you have public water and public sewage, and that, if you look at the map, it's basically down around the Harvey Run, very close to the Freedom area. And we had a request to do that from several property owners down there who wanted to build on smaller lots. It is a traditional neighborhood development where it's a closer knit neighborhood.
But
So we made the quarter acre lots where there is access already to sewage and water, if not already there. And they're saying, why do we need 45,000 square feet to build a house in this dense neighborhood already? So that's why we allow them that flexibility to go ahead and do that. In
you
that
need
area.
45,000 square feet to let your kids go run and play.
No, those
Yeah.
lots are
No.
designed for smaller, that area is designed for smaller lots already. There's already Harvey Run, Ninth Street Extension. New Sewickley line goes all the way down to Freedom High School football field. So in that area, we allowed that flexibility, but already Beaver Falls had put the infrastructure in years ago, water, septic, it's there, so we allowed the smaller lots. Everywhere else in the township, all the other zoning districts, it is 45,000 square feet. That allows you have to have two approved septic sites and your well, and you're right, they have to be 100 feet apart. But with 45,000, it's doable. In this day and age, it's probably not probable that you're gonna find two approved septic sites, but that's,
We just had a 2-acre lot that failed.
Yeah, that, yeah.
They couldn't get.
and it isn't New Sewickley, it's DEP.
Right. Where would we be getting our water from?
Well, it depends on what area you're talking about. Right now, Westview is supplying a lot of the water for Danbury, Freedom Crossing. As far as I know, that's the only.
That's coming out of the Ohio River.
Through their,
Right.
through Westview's new, that's why New
And they're-
Sewickley decided to do that. It's a new
They're
facility.
going to run a test on how pure that is, and then somebody else is reanalyzing it and say it isn't. What would be happening if we would do a study and use put up a reservoir on the Connection that goes through Green Valley, down below Green Valley, to put a reservoir in down there. To do that, the only thing we have to put up with is a cranberry sewage plant, and if we put our own sewage plant in, that should be enough water, if we have a big enough reservoir to do that.
That would be a question for the guy behind you on the municipal.
Well,
Larry, run.
Their meeting is the first Monday of the month.
With enough money, anything's possible.
I don't want to see it. I know it's inevitable. You know, I'll keep my well and septic as long as I can, and
Same
go
here.
that route.
Same here.
You know, I don't.
Change is inevitable. It's already changed for me. I'm 60 years old. I never had the traffic of my farm on the road. Now, it's changed.
It,
And the only thing I can do is accept it. I'm not gonna fight it. So, change is inevitable. There's changes in everything, housing types, and we're just caught in the middle trying to reach a happy medium between private property owners' rights, like you own private property. You like to do what's right, or you want to on your property. On one end of the spectrum is private property rights, and on the other end, it's everybody else in government and the township residents saying, we want to tell the rest of the property owners what they can and can't do. So we're here to try to reach a happy medium.
That's a misconception. We're not here telling people what they can and can't do. We're asking that you act on behalf of responsible. We ask that you ask. We ask that you act on behalf of the residents to allow for responsible development. And what you have allowed in this township is irresponsible. But we're not asking for property owners and farmers. We're asking for developers to behave responsibly within the parameters of New Sewickley Township. But you're not. But you're not.
It's only your opinion.
But it's not only my
It
opinion.
is only your opinion.
How did you
That's the only one that counts, is our
I
opinion.
know. I'd like to carry that on.
When we worked on PRDs, we looked at countless examples of PRD examples. And we tried to be fair to the property owner and to the developer and reach a happy medium. And I think we've done a good job. If you're too restrictive, it's not feasible. The property owner gets stabbed in the back, literally. You're stabbing him in the back. You're saying, no, you can't do this with your property, even though you've worked all your life, you've paid all your taxes. Now you're telling him, no, you can't do that. So if we reach a happy medium,
Again, we're
That's
not
what
talking
our
about the
goal
property
is.
owner. We're
We don't
talking
want
about
to
the
be talking
developer.
about the property
We're
owner.
talking about the
this
developer.
is private property in New Sewickley Township. It isn't public.
We're talking about the developer who is behaving in a grotesque.
Move on. I need a motion to adjourn. Done with your agenda.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second
All in favor? Signify by saying aye. Noes, thank you. Good night, thank you, Joanna. To me, that was pretty major. I hope we can have a few more sessions like that.
Glad you liked it.